Today, guys, we're just going to spend some time reviewing what we were talking about last week with triangle congruence properties. So remember, we have 5 different ones. You have side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and HL that you can choose from. These problems on these notes are just kind of to guide you in a review, since it's been a little bit since we looked at these, and then you're going to get some practice today in class. So the first thing that you want to do, remember at this point we're not proving anything yet. We aren't writing them into column proofs, we're just justifying using a method. So the first problem, you start by marking your given. So you have EB is congruent to DB. Mark those two segments with a dash. And you also have AB is congruent to CB. So we're going to mark these two segments with a dash. We always need 3 pieces of information to prove that the triangles are congruent. So we're going to mark the reflexive sides, if there is one, or vertical angles. In this case, we have vertical angles, here at ABE and over here at CBD. So we mark those two things as congruent, and then we choose a method based on the order that the things are listed in. So there's a side, then an angle, then a side that's congruent. So these are going to be congruent by side, angle, side. Same thing here. We mark the given statement. A is congruent to C, here and here. BE is congruent to BD, so we mark that here and here. Once again, we have vertical angles in the middle because it's the same figure that we just looked at, so we'll mark those as congruent. And this time we have 2 angles and a side. The side is non-included, so we list them in order: angle, angle, side. Here in this next one, we're given AB is congruent to CD, so that's true here and here. We're also given that BC is congruent to DA. Then this one, they share a reflexive side down the middle. So we have 3 sets of congruent sides, which means side, side, side is the method we are choosing. Problem number 4, we're going to mark the given. It says that ABC and ADC are right triangles. That means here and here, those are right angles. Then we know that AB is congruent to AD. They also share side AC, so this is a reflexive side that we can mark as congruent. And then we have a right triangle whose leg and hypotenuse are congruent to this right triangle whose leg and hypotenuse is the same length. So that means that by the HL theorem, these 2 triangles are congruent. Looking at problem number 5 on the back of the page. By marking the given, we know that XWY is congruent to ZWY. So that's these 2 angles on the left. We know that XYW is congruent, and that should say ZYW, not ZT. So XYW here and here, those 2 are congruent. And we're trying to prove triangle WXY is congruent to triangle WZY. These should both be triangles here. So we know that this is given. This is a reflexive side, so it's congruent to itself. And we have angle, and then a side, and another angle. So ASA as our property. Here, you're given a little bit different information. Some of them talk about midpoints. So in this first one, you have C as the midpoint of BD, and AB is congruent to AD. If C is the midpoint, that means that these 2 sides have to be congruent. Then AB is congruent to AD. And this one is a reflexive side. So we know that by side, 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 those 2 are congruent. So you can go through and mark these next 2 based on the information you're given. knowing what you know about what a bisector does, and also knowing that this symbol is meaning perpendicular, and what you know about perpendicular lines and what type of angle that they make. So finish those up now and then check your answers. The last two should have both been by side, angle, side, that the two triangles are congruent. So you can check your work with what you've marked as congruent based on what's here, and make sure that you have that property written down for both of them. For this last one, it gives you that AB is parallel to DC and AD is parallel to BC. We have not yet talked about what relationships between parallel lines do to the relationships between angles. We're going to get into that some more next week. So on this assignment that you're doing today, everything will be marked for you. If it's given that it's parallel, it will be marked what angles should be congruent as a result of that. So because AB is parallel to DC, that actually means that these two angles, DAC and ACB, are congruent, and then that means that also these two angles, BAC and DCA, are congruent. Okay, so there's our two sets of angles that are congruent. Again, on your practice today, these angles will already be marked for you. Then we have a reflexive side in the middle. So by this property, we should have angle, side, angle based on our labeling. Go ahead and try the next one on your own, again remembering what the definition of a bisector is, and then check your answer. Alright, so if AD bisects EC, then that means that B is the midpoint of both of these two things. So that means that AB and BD should be congruent, and EB and BC should also be congruent. So then, knowing that, we have our sides marked, and we have a vertical angle here around angle B. So we have side, angle, side for our statement.